Accountants are starting to become very important to companies these days. There's so many recruiters they don't know anything about accounting and finance, and they're just jumping into it because they heard people are hiring in accounting. We're seeing accounting and finance the last 2 years has really picked up in hiring.
What's the biggest mistake you see the candidates make?
The biggest mistake that I see the candidates make going into FP&A.
William Spengler is the founder of Frederick Fox, a rapidly growing recruiting firm specializing in finance and accounting talent. Since 2019, he's led the company to over 700 clients with a team of 55-plus veteran recruiters, scaling without outside funding and redefining hiring through speed, efficiency, and accountability.
What do you think's driving the last couple of years, the increase in companies asking for accountants?
There's a shortage of talent, people getting out of accounting because they're maybe not getting into the six figures fast enough, or they're not being treated. And that's starting to change now.
How do you see AI changing the recruiting and hiring process?
AI is really coming for the recruiter and HR's job, but I don't think it's quite there yet where you have a fully AI automated interview process. AI is being used right now in a few different ways in recruiting. One is to
FP&A guy here. Have you ever wanted to level up your FP&A skills? Then check out the FP&A Guy's Ultimate Course Bundle at thefpnaguy.com. That's the FPANDA guy.com and use code podcast to save 25%. Get started learning today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Tomorrow, where we delve into the world of financial planning and analysis, examining its current state and future prospects. I'm your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A Guy, and I'll be guiding you through the evolving landscape of FP&A. Each week, we're joined by thought leaders, industry experts, and practitioners who share their insights and experiences, helping us navigate today's complexities and tomorrow's uncertainties. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting your journey, this show has something for everyone. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome Will Spengler to the show. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, really excited to have you. So the show will be a little different. Will won't be talking to us about his deep experience in FP&A, but we will have a lot of finance conversations here. So Will is a seasoned recruiter, bringing over 10 years of executive search experience in accounting, finance, and technology. He is the founder of Frederick Fox. Prior to founding that, Will was a partner with Tima Solutions, a $105 million revenue privately held company. And previous to Tima, he was a senior executive recruiter at Adecco Staffing, a publicly traded company. He is acknowledged as a thought leader in the industry, well known for his client service, creativity, and attention to detail. Early in his career, Will managed financial and technology-based activities at the Smith & Wesson and Green Spring Ventures. He holds a degree in finance from the Ohio State University. Why is it the Ohio State University?
I think it's one of those pompous things that Ohio State does, to be honest with you. People can't stand the Buckeyes, when you go into other states, you go to, I never knew how much other people don't like Buckeye fans. It's pretty funny.
I don't hate Ohio State. I don't like them. I'm usually root for others just because, they're the big school that's easy to root against. But I always love people that you have to be like, no, it's the Ohio State University. And I'm always like, spare me.
Right. I try not to rub it in, but every now and again, I'll do it with a Michigan fan. Just kind of.
That's a given. If you're an Ohio State fan, and vice versa. I get that one.
Well, thanks for the intro on my background. I'm an agency recruiter. I've been at it 14 years. I like to say I was just young enough and just dumb enough to start a company about 6 years ago. Young enough in the sense that I had the energy to do it, and dumb enough to know that I didn't know what I was really getting into. And so I had the energy. I was willing to take it on. Frederick Fox now, just for you guys to understand, it's we have about 50 to 55 recruiters, all agency. We predominantly focus on accounting and finance, technology, and sales and ops verticals. And we typically do at the senior level, 100,000 to 300,000 a year. We are nationwide, but I would say our predominant vertical, what I went to school for, as well as what I've spent 14 years doing, is accounting and finance. I have the pleasure of meeting with CFOs on a regular basis. I've worked with hundreds of CFOs. I've placed hundreds of people at the staff accountant level, senior accountant level, within FP&A up to director of finance, investor relations, treasury. I've gotten the pleasure of getting to know a lot of different companies at different stages and understanding some of the challenges that companies are facing when trying to hire an FP&A person. And so maybe for some of your listeners, I can offer a lens of, what I'm seeing in the marketplace and how to position yourself as an FP&A person or any trends that I'm seeing given the scope of our agency and who we interact with. So
Yeah, and excited to jump into that. We'll get there here in a minute. So you did your bachelor's in finance. How did you end up in recruiting?
so I while I was in college, I actually worked for a venture capital firm and I used to try to value companies for direct investment. I was very passionate. I was really into modeling. I really like corporate valuations personally. But when I got out of school, my first job was a cost accountant within a gun manufacturer. And I was in a basement of a factory and I didn't like cost accounting. So I actually got recruited by a recruiter at a staffing agency for a cost accountant job. And when I went in, they said, "Hey, you're a financial analyst slash cost accountant that is a good communicator. Have you ever thought about being a recruiter?" And I thought it was a scam. I thought I didn't know that recruiter was like really a job. I ended up taking it, and here I am 14 years later in the industry and doing my best to add value to as many people as possible.
Funny how life works out. You never know where you'll end up, how one conversation changes everything.
It's so true. And I like it. Sometimes I'm a very analytical introvert, even as a leader. And so, this staffing company, we're 10 to 12 million. I do find myself oftentimes really I'm very hands-on with our controller. I do a lot of like the 1 to 3 year planning. I'm always looking at actuals. So even though I'm a sales like leader in a sense, and a recruiter, I very much do accounting work with our controller and I do still scratch my itch with planning and spreadsheets. And so I'm not your typical car salesman of a recruiter, hopefully.
Got it. Well, and definitely not a used car salesman. So that's good. No.
Right. Only fresh vehicles. Yep.
What was I going to say? Do you ever build a model these days? Do you do any of that you ever value a company still?
No, I haven't done the valuation of a company in a while. Most of the modeling I do is around our own business.
Sure,
Just
that's what I figured.
Yep. Albeit I'd love to, that would excite me. I also consult for a guy that runs a gym. He's an owner of a gym here in West Palm Beach, and I'll just plan his gym enterprise. It's a small, business, but besides doing our business, I also consult and do a little bit of financial planning for a gym, collaborative gyms here in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, so you get a little bit of that as well. Nice.
Yeah, it scratches my itch.
No, I get it. I still like to get my hands dirty with the model, even though I do a lot of talking now and training, and I don't do as much of the hardcore modeling work. So I can relate.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything too crazy. I'm just looking at, okay, a lot of it is P&L over the next 2 years. We'll try to forecast our balance sheet, our cash flow position, but we're not overly complicated, but it still is, well, the way we're structured is a little complicated because we're a multi-entity staffing business. Has to do with our internal partnership structure, but so like we do a consolidated FP&A plan. But I find that fun and I find that challenging. That keeps me going versus just being a salesperson all the time.
Yep. Get to close the door and be analytical every so often.
Exactly. My introverted nature. So
I hear you. Always good to have those times when you can kind of shut it off. So I'm curious, as we talk about recruiting, job market, what are you seeing in the market today? Maybe just talk a little bit about what you're seeing, particularly, let's start with from the employer's point of view. What are they looking for? What's kind of your overall take on the market?
I think that the market really slowed a little bit during the election period, and we came into 2025 and there was a lot of optimism. All of a sudden it was, we're hiring, and there was a big boost. And then obviously the tariffs came along, and there was a real pause in Q2 of 2025. There's that glimmer of optimism right now going into Q3 in 2025. But one of the things from my side is we're seeing accounting and finance the last 2 years has really picked up in hiring. And that's been a vertical that's been very active. It's interesting. I've been saying that accountants have become like the new software engineers. If you remember a few years back, 2019, 2020, software engineers almost walked on water. I used to have software engineers that have spreadsheets of they'd have 15 offers. They didn't even have to interview, they'd have offers. Accountants are starting to become very important to companies these days. And there's so many recruiters that they don't know anything about accounting and finance, and they're just jumping into it because they heard people are hiring in accounting. We're seeing a big push in accounting and finance hiring, which is positive. So
Interesting. On the accounting hiring, then we'll get into more FP&A directly. Do you think a lot of that has to do with the shortage we've had in CPAs, or it's just companies needing more? Because we keep hearing all this, hey, we're going to automate, more things and AI and, accountants are in trouble type of thing. A lot of that work will be automated. So what do you think's driving the last couple of years, the increase in, companies asking for accountants?
I think there's just a shortage of accounting and finance talent. I think a lot of people, it hasn't been a skill set that's been valued or paid properly, I believe, in the past. So I think there was a lot of recent grads that were coming out were going more like computer science, technical, because, software development, because they wanted to have a higher earning potential. But I think that there's a shortage of talent, people getting out of accounting because they're maybe not getting into the six figures fast enough, or they're not being treated, and that's starting to change now. We're seeing the opposite recently, that a lot of developers, especially onshore in the United States, a lot of that's going offshore, and a lot of companies are starting to value just having good financial reporting, good planning. I don't know if I have the perfect answer, but I think companies are a lot more holding on to cash, delaying capital investments right now, waiting for that right time with all the market uncertainty. So, as the economy's been uncertain, I think a lot of companies have been wanting to really look at their pricing, really look at their expenses, really look at their risk exposure. And I think like there's been a premium on internal accounting controls, planning, pricing. So I don't know if that's the answer, but that's what we're seeing companies double down on understanding their business more.
Yeah, and, at the end of the day, there's no perfect answer, but that all makes sense, right? We're all kind of guessing a little bit. Anytime you're asking for something at a macro level of what's causing it all, unless there's some huge event that's very easy to attribute it to, we're all guessing. As I like to say, ask four economists, get five opinions.
Yeah. That's good. I'm going to steal that one.
Pretty much how it works. Feel free. I don't know where I think I stole it from an econ professor back in college. So let's dive in a little more in the FP&A specifically. So when people come to you looking for FP&A roles, what are the hiring managers typically looking for? What do they want when they come to you and they say, hey, I need to hire an FP&A person for my team?
Yeah, it depends on the level of the FP&A
Sure.
person, whether it's like an analyst
Or
or
with kind of that analyst manager level, not few years of experience, call it anywhere from, that 3 to 6, 7 years experience kind of range, analyst manager type position.
they want a lot. Maybe that's a way to put it. They want the moon, especially if they're going to pay a recruiter like me. And I get it that we have to earn our fee, but I think it depends on the hiring manager. I'm going to answer this a few different ways. Some There is a trend where people like to see the investment banking foundation just because they've had a scope of work across different industries or clients or valuations of different businesses. And then they go into one corporate role and they're usually really good modelers. So sometimes we get that investment banking desire, but other times, and this is a little bit more rare, some FP&A leaders like to see that somebody spent time in accounting first and that they actually understand the balance sheet, P&L, and the statement of cash flows. And then now they're becoming more analytical. That's a little bit more rare of the hiring manager that values that accounting foundation. But I think overall, what are we typically seeing companies ask for, we keep getting, Excel's a given, right? Got to be good in Excel. But we're seeing this increased desire for Power BI, Tableau, and SQL skills. So it's almost like every company wants to get better dashboard reporting. But then they also want the effective communicator and storyteller and these intangible skills in a candidate. And sometimes that's hard because they want the technical, but then they want the person that can communicate effectively. And so I think the biggest intangible that just keeps coming up is, can this person take the data and explain it to a non-financial person, like a business unit leader, in a way that they can actually take action on it and affect change in the operations? It's almost like every time I speak to a CFO, that's the skill set. It's, can they communicate? Someone can take action on an operational level.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. Interesting on the investment banking. I definitely know that's a route. I get asked all the time of how to get into FP&A, and most people are asking me are coming from the accounting route. And I usually tell people, look, there's probably 3 or 4 paths that probably cover 90% of people that go to it. You go the investment banking, then you go the corporate finance route, and you end up in FP&A. You do consulting, you go to FP&A, you do some strategic consulting depending on the companies. You go from accounting/audit, whether it's accounting or audit, but you come from that accounting background into FP&A. Or you get someone who's kind of switching careers, they get an MBA and they get a corporate finance role. I think that covered probably 95% of the people that get into FP&A. And then you always have the odd out there. Somebody got the geography degree and somehow just ended up in an FP&A role.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. There's a lot of like public audit people that want to come out and go into FP&A, and that's a tough transition. It's hard because they've been doing audit or assurance or like SEC reporting, but they realize like, hey, I don't really like this technical accounting stuff. I really want to be more analytical and FP&A, and not a lot of companies will pay that premium without really having, that experience really.
Yeah, I think that's a common challenge is if you've done a few years of work, you've already upped that salary some, and then you're trying to make a switch and they're like, I'm paying a manager type level, but you have entry level experience in FP&A. And so there's a little bit of that
100%.
disconnect.
Yep. 100%. I think they would rather, and I hate to say this, but companies will tell us like, I'd rather just get someone with 1 year of finance experience and a finance degree than hiring the CPA that's a 3-year EY auditor that wants to get into FP&A. And I'm sure that's a tough pill to swallow, because when you're that person, you can do it, but companies, it's interesting. So
Your thought on bridging the gap. Are you seeing companies valuing? We're seeing a lot of certification programs come up for FP&A. AFP has one called the FPAC, which is, they also have one for Treasury, kind of the equivalent of like CPA, CMA a little bit, but very much FP&A focused. Wharton's created a certificate recently, Corporate Finance Institute. Do you feel like managers, recruiters in general, from what you're seeing, really put much stock at this point into, certifications beyond maybe a CPA, CMA, MBA? I've never had one tell me, hey, they need to have this or that certification. But what's your take on kind of some of that education and how you see it as you talk to people?
I still think the gold standard is to be the CPA. And I think the CMA is not as valued as it probably should be. Companies, we don't often see people say, I really want to hire a CMA.
Yep. Yeah, not surprised to hear that.
And we don't see a lot of companies that, it depends on the business on the CFA. I think the problem with the CFA is you get into valuing stocks and bonds and, some of that stuff is just, companies are like, we really want that corporate finance experience. How do you bridge the gap? I don't know if I have the perfect answer, but I think I would almost say getting certified in like Power BI, Tableau, or, I don't know if there's any analytical certifications that prove you've taken this time to understand dashboard reporting. And if you don't have the experience, maybe demonstrating work you've done on the side that shows that like you've really tried to bridge this gap. And I think the right hiring manager should value that. And I think value the accounting background. I don't understand why they wouldn't, especially if you mix that with a technical dashboard, whether that's Power BI, Tableau, or SQL.
I think at a minimum, everyone who works in FP&A needs to have a basic understanding of accounting. They need to understand it well enough to forecast. And so I definitely think there's value in somebody who has accounting. I think some discount it as they think, and I've seen this, I've had hiring managers like this, right? I had one who had the philosophy that accountants don't make good FP&A people. I definitely wouldn't say that. Some are better than others, but his view is they're very much rule-based, focused on tying everything out, process-oriented. And it's like FP&A is very much more gray, your business forward looking, kind of that strategic. And I always just say to people, you have to understand, is that your personality? You want to be more business oriented, it fits you. You can be great in FP&A and have come from an accounting background, but don't do it just because you want to get more money and you don't know what the role's about. And you're laughing because I'm sure you've seen it, where there's people who want to be in FP&A because they think that hey, maybe I'll get paid more, but it's not really work they're going to enjoy. And so I tell people, you need to understand what FP&A is and make sure that's a transition that makes sense for you, that's work you would enjoy doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends on the person. It's funny to me sometimes that, and I don't fully understand this because I haven't had a career in accounting. I've
Sure.
just a little bit spent a little time as a cost accountant, but there do people do get so in the weeds on transactional accounting and just getting past data reported in a way where you understand a point in time. But sometimes those accountants struggle to understand how the business works, how it will scale, margins, stepping back and understanding the operations of a business. I know that's a loose term, operations, but like I find that like I do understand what your past mentor is saying is like, yeah, why can't accountants step back and understand the business sometimes? I don't personally get it, but
Yeah. And I've seen some that are great at it and some that struggle. I had a FP or accountant that I worked with in one business. I think you'll appreciate this. And he was great at the accounting. I had an FP&A role open. I asked him any interest. He goes, no, that's just all funny math. It's like, I did that one. You're just making up numbers. I'm good. Like, he liked being able to tie everything out. It fit his personality. I'm like, that's fine. You do great on the accounting side. If that's where you want to be, works for me. But it was just kind of funny because he knew himself well enough. He did it once. He's like, that's not my personality. No thanks.
yeah, I mean, maybe he's a perfectionist and wants to have accurate information. I think there's an art to saying, okay, what if our revenues doubled? How would our expenses go up? Do we have leverage? Do we have operational leverage on fixed versus variable costs? If we did this, what would that look like? I personally find that stuff more interesting than the perfectionist accounting of what happened in the past, but different strokes for different folks.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. You and me both. So I get it. A couple other things you mentioned. I want to dig into two others. You mentioned the technical skills. So you're seeing bigger requests, not surprised, Power BI, Tableau. You're seeing more on SQL as well.
yeah, we are. There's this like financial systems analyst role. I don't know if you've seen that out there.
Yeah, I have. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah. And this business systems analyst where they want somebody that can communicate with IT. And this is where I was laughing before when I said that they want a lot, right? It's like, how do you be this technical person that can work with IT and at least query to get to the data you need, or, be able to communicate with IT of which data you need. But then how can you also be that intangible high level thinker? That's a tough, that's a purple squirrel right there, in my opinion.
It is tough. The SQL, I did a couple years of SQL and that was incredibly helpful in my career. So I'm a big fan. I played a little bit of that finance, IT bridge, analyst. My title was never technically systems analyst, but I got involved in that a fair amount in my career. So I can definitely relate to exactly what you're talking about. And also, it's really hard, as I like to say, if you can find someone that's great at all those, either you found a unicorn and odds are you can't afford them. I mean, there's some that are good and they're well rounded, but sometimes the expectation is like, no, they're not going to be world class in all these.
100%. Yeah, we have that discussion all the time. I can name an example of an active search where we really have to like actually go down I call them sometimes like the Christmas wish list, like your Christmas tree list. And it's like, okay, what's really important here? Because look, I know I have to earn my fee, but we can't 3D print candidates. We can get as close as possible. And there's just restraints in the market, right? And hiring managers need to be flexible and really understand what do they really need to hire here.
And I appreciate that. Makes a lot of sense as asking them, okay, if you have to rank this, what's really most important? Give me the top 3 things. Let me focus on that. Hopefully they have some of the others and you can round out the rest.
Exactly. Yep. We try our best to, and it's a very competitive industry. So oftentimes we're competing out against 3 or 4 other agencies, but we do a really good job. We have a high fill ratio.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. When they decide to go to others, it gets competitive because they're not finding the candidates by themselves.
100%.
Yeah, no,
So
I've used recruiting firms for hiring before. Not a lot, but I've used them a little bit. And I've one of the companies I got hired at, they were using a recruiter when they hired me.
yeah, I feel like we're like attorneys. We're all nobody wants to use us really, but every now and again a position is really critical and it's a quality hire need or there's a speed to fill the role. And I think that's where we can add a lot of value, justify our charge for our services.
Sure, yeah. I mean, nobody wants to pay the fees, but there are times when it just makes sense. FP&A guy here. Today I want to talk about the FP&A guy's ultimate FP&A course bundle. This bundle includes over 10 hours of content recorded by Ron Montero and myself, many templates, and great lessons to make you a better FP&A professional. The content includes FP&A business partnering, how to manage tough conversations, build world-class relationships, and hold the business accountable. Includes modern Excel, which is a real game changer for the way you'll work in Excel. Excel tables, the gateway to modern Excel. Power Query, a game changer for transforming your manual processes and loading data. And then dynamic arrays. Next, we cover modeling design principles. In this course, we talk about the importance of designing models in a certain way and how important it is that you think about design. And last but not least, driving value through smart analysis. How you can conduct data analysis to be a better FP&A professional. Go ahead and sign up for this bundle at thefpnaguy.com. That's thefpnaguy.com. Use the code podcast to save 25%. Get started learning today. I'm curious, you mentioned this. I want to just touch on this when you said what are employers looking for. The other thing is you mentioned that ability to communicate data. So not just say, hey, here's the report. Help the business understand and move forward. Why do you think that's becoming such a big request? Why do you think is it just we have more data? Are people realizing, finance and FP&A is really kind of should be that strategic that helps with data? Or what do you think's driving that request of really being able to kind of bridge that gap and really not just produce data, but help businesses action the data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what it is that a lot of business unit leaders or general managers or division heads are coming up the sales or operations route. And I think they're very good operators. They're really good salespeople. They understand the business, but not everybody has the P&L balance sheet understanding, cash flow understanding, and data is being accumulated and automated for good reporting. But if you're a BU person, you're a sales leader, and you get a report, it needs to be displayed in a way that how can I say this? When you're communicating with salespeople, sorry for salespeople, but if they're non-financial, you have to be able to explain it in a way that a third grader could understand it. And what you hand them has to be on target and relevant to what they're trying to solve in their business. And I think there's a growing frustration with companies where it's like, they're good with SQL, they're good with all these dashboards, but this isn't like, I don't understand what I do with this. This is a bunch of fancy stuff. How do I drive my bottom line? how do I get more sales or retain revenue, or what's happening? Why aren't I more profitable, or why are my expenses going up? Which levers are under my control and which levers should I be focused on to get that bottom line? It's a lot to unpack there, but it's the ability to interview a business unit leader, understand what they're trying to solve, understand how their division works, and then displaying and communicating information that's relevant that they can receive like a third grader so they can take action. And I don't know, that's a tough thing to find. So
Yeah, and I like the third grader thing. What, explain it to me like I'm 5, right? I think that's a Reddit. There's a Reddit forum there, a subreddit about, explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner or 5. So what do you look for? Let's say, you're trying to fill a role, you're getting those resumes, you're trying to find that candidate. How do you get an idea if a candidate's good at really being able to, take the data, tell that story, help the business implement, right? To influence and kind of make that step from data reporter to helping them make actionable decisions. What do you look for when you know that's kind of critical to the role when you're seeing candidates? How do you determine they have that?
there's some kind of telltale signs in the beginning when you interview somebody to just ask them about like explain to me how the business works. What are your consolidated revenues? How, tell me about your gross profit, how that's changed over time. Tell me about how your who do you compete with and what's the market position of your current company versus what else is out there. And you can quickly tell if somebody really understands their business or if they have no idea of the competitive landscape, they had no idea of what the revenues are, they don't understand the bottom line and what projects they're taking on to improve those things. That's usually pretty telltelling. Like if I say, "Hey, how big is the company?" and they're like, I don't know. The bottom line was 1,000,000 last year. And I'm like, how can you be in FP&A and not know the revenues of business, you know?
Yeah, interesting as I hear you say all that, it gets back to something I hear all the time when I ask people, and I may be prefacing you because this will be a future question, but I ask a lot of people, what's the number one soft skill people need? Or not so much skill, what's the number one thing people should do to be a better business partner? And I so often hear on the better business partner, be curious, curiosity. And that person who's curious about the business will usually understand those revenue numbers and the growth patterns and all the things you mentioned. So it's just that reminder. Oh, I hear that again and again. If you want to be a better business partner, be curious. Even one went to the point of calling it humble curiosity. Don't be curious for the sake of, hey, I want to look like I'm asking a lot of questions and I'm smarter than you, but really to learn that humble curiosity. And that's now what I use now. That's probably one of my favorite. I listed as one of the number one skills you need because it shows through. It's interesting as I hear you talk from the recruiter side and I kind of put together what I've heard from all these different guests and how it all, fits together.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the humble curiosity. If you're new to the company and you get to the answer and then you go meet a BU leader and you say, you need to do this, this, and this. Well, you're creating friction right off the bat. Why not seek to understand an interview? And maybe you might learn something that you don't, you know, the numbers might tell you you need to do this, but you don't necessarily understand the obstacles or the things that they're running into. So being curious to first seek to understand, because the numbers aren't going to tell you everything. There could be bottlenecks that you're unaware of because you've never actually been in that industry, right? So you come in hard charging as the new FP&A guy, you're actually not going to be effective for the company, really. You want to earn their trust, seek to understand, and that's how you can be more effective to implement change, right?
I heard someone say if they tell you they want you to come in and ruffle feathers and make a bunch of changes, they're lying. And I kind of laugh in the sense of, no, they want you to come in and listen and then implement the changes. Like, they don't want you to come in on day one and say, here's how we're going to do things. Like, let's see how that works. Great point there. The listening and learning and understanding things.
100%. I think sometimes it depends on the hiring leader, but there's sometimes a premium on the person that actually has the corporate finance background and is a little bit more humbled, worked in different divisions, then got to the corporate finance side, understand how to piece it all together versus the Ivy League MBA, investment banking, and they come in thinking their stuff doesn't stink. That can be a little annoying for certain companies, you know?
It can definitely be a little off-putting. I had a guy, I asked everybody the question of where would they rate themselves in Excel on a 1 to 10? But then I follow up and explain why you gave the rating you did, because that helps me understand how they think about it and if they're learning and kind of dig into it. I asked this one guy where he rated himself, and he's like, "I'm a 10." And I asked Blaine, and he went on about how he could do everything. I'm like, "I know a lot about Excel. Microsoft MVP now, so I know my stuff. Am I an expert? No. But am I good? Yes." And so I started asking, "You know about this formula? No. Do you know about this formula? No. Do you know about this? No. Do you want to change your answer? Fine. I'm a 9." Like, all right, not hiring this guy.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that you can do is in my opinion is on the Excel question, just say, "Well, I can do pivot tables and VLOOKUPs." That's like the canned industry answer, right? Pivot tables and VLOOKUPs. We have some of our high managers say, "What's your favorite like Excel formula?" Like it'd be nice if somebody actually like use can concentrate or H lookup. Even if you said H lookup instead of VLOOKUP, it's like that's just like the canned VLOOKUP and pivot tables. It's like, no, go a little deeper. There's got to be more to that you've learned. And if that's your answer, maybe you're not that good, you know?
No, I hear you. The canned one. I'm advanced because I know pivot tables and VLOOKUP.
I'm a salesperson and I know VLOOKUPs and pivot tables, you know? It's
What do you think? What is the biggest mistake? We have a lot of people listen to the show that are looking for work or wanting to get into FP&A. What's the biggest mistake you see the candidates make?
the biggest mistake that I see the candidates make going into FP&A.
Yeah, well, just kind of in that job process, they're looking for jobs in FP&A. What do you see as some of the common mistakes they're making, you think?
I think it's just reaching out to hiring managers directly and explaining to them that you actually research the company, you understand what their business does, and you're able to give relevant information on why you think you're a good fit. I think a lot of times people kick back, they wait for HR to call, they get lost in the HR black hole. They trust that this AI bot that's having you apply to everything is going to actually go to a junior HR generalist that's going to actually call you. I think the best thing you could do is you see a posting, find out who the CFO or the VP of finance is at the company and reach out and have a relevant message that demonstrates you understand their business model, and you have understanding of potential problems. Don't assume they're problems, but you have relevant experience solving types of problems and you'd hope to have the opportunity to talk to them. So I think it's that personal touch with relevant messaging. I think a lot of people are kicking back, trusting AI, trusting HR. Like it's just too noisy out there.
So basically, I think the advice I'm hearing is go beyond the numbers game. Don't just apply to everything. Make yourself relevant, reach out, talk to people, try to let them know why you're a good candidate, why you've done your homework, and that you'd love to speak with them. Amazing how often it comes back to networking at some level.
It does, even in the agency world, like when AI got I would say recruiters started scraping data, doing mass outreaches, and started to do a lot of AI tools about 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago. And that was like this huge competitive advantage to, you know, from the people that weren't adopting the technology. But now in this industry, it's really back to we call it back to old school. Can you actually develop a real authentic relationship and actually not going being more targeted and actually developing a relationship gets 10 times results because then all this automated emailing, I think people are just tired of it's just too much noise. They're tired of being dripped on and, that's not punching through anymore.
It's interesting. Kind of speaking to that. So how do you see AI changing the recruiting and hiring process as we go forward? We had that period where all of a sudden everything was being blocked. And you had to put all the key AI words to get through the bots and different things. And now you say you're seeing a little bit more of that personal touch again, which should always be there, in my opinion. I'm sure you would agree as a agency and a recruiter. But, kind of how do you see it changing the recruiting and hiring process as we move forward? Kind of how do you see that balance of AI with, I think it's AI with humans, at least that's how I see it.
I think AI is being used for right now in a few different ways in recruiting. One is to get a transcript of the interview to get better notes, to make sure you gleaned all the information and remembered all the information of that actual interview. And so there's a lot of like transcription AI to then auto match to certain jobs. So we are seeing AI being able to go comb through a lot of database, a huge database and multiple database faster to auto match candidates to jobs. So it's taking a lot of that front end sourcing work. And I think the other big area is just access to data. There's so much AI now that is getting better at finding cell phone data, personal mobile data, work phone data. As far as like AI from an end-to-end process, there are companies coming out that are doing AI chat, like they're AI agents that actually the AI does the interview. AI is really coming for the recruiter and HR's job, but I don't think it's quite there yet where you have a fully AI automated interview process. There still has to be a human connecting in real time through that process, but they're certainly trying.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't done any research there, but I'm not surprised to see that trying the avatar or the AI doing the interview. I think right now it would be pretty painful. I'm sure it's getting better and better rapidly, but so much of it is human touch and connecting. You want to hire someone you connect with. And so I could see in some ways is reducing bias, but it's going to create its own set of problems too.
Yeah, and I think they say reducing bias, but there's sometimes bias in those things as well. So, but I won't go down
Yeah,
that
correct.
road.
I agree. I mean, we've all seen AI to certain degrees are biased. Like, we're coming up on the 4th of July when they asked it to show pictures of the founding fathers. 30% were minorities, and or women, and it's like, yeah, you're totally wrong here.
I get what you're saying. I don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole, but I'm right there
Yeah,
with
and I'm just talking like the founding fathers and July 4th. It's like very clear what they were versus the images you're generating. And I get what they're trying to do, but it's just, that's what I mean. There's bias both in all kinds of different ways, and they're trying to address them. So we'll leave that one there so we don't get ourselves in trouble. All righty. Moving on. FP&A. So these are some standard questions we ask every guest. What do you think is the number one technical skill that someone in FP&A needs to master?
I think it's being able to do strong variance analysis, actual to budget, actual to forecast, and year to dates. I don't know if that's technically a technical skill, but I think we'll count it. But I would say the hottest one is just right now we're just seeing all over the place Power BI and Tableau. I think that's sticking out.
Yeah, so two things there, variance commentary and basically business intelligence.
Correct.
Tableau, Power BI. What about softer human skill?
Softer human skill. I think it's the ability to effectively communicate back to the humble curiosity and demonstrating an understanding of the business model.
What is the number one thing you would tell people that would help improve their chances during the job search, or number one thing they should really be focusing on?
I think it's the interpersonal connection to the hiring manager directly and being able to have a really relevant example or industry example or business problem example that speaks to the actual hiring manager. I think it's that personal touch and not sitting back and waiting. That's the best advice I could give. So
I like that. All right, this is the one I'm curious to see what you say. I know you like to occasionally get into Excel. Do you have a favorite feature or formula?
in Excel,
Yep.
oh, you're putting me on the spot. And now I don't want to give the canned answer.
Pivot tables and VLOOKUP.
Even tables and VLOOKUPs. No, I really like to play with complicated SUMIFs and COUNTIFs and like a lot of conditional formatting as well, based off of different rules. I'm very beginner to intermediate personally at this point, but I like complicated sum if functions, to be honest.
I like it. That works. All right. Now we're going to get to know you a little bit, Will, beyond
Okay, go ahead.
recruiting and FP&A. Favorite hobby?
It was playing guitar until I had 3 kids. So I was a big musician. That's the picture behind here. But ever since I had kids, and I don't blame my wife, but if you have kids, you got to be able to help. If you're practicing an instrument for 2 hours, you're just looking for a fight with your wife. But that's my favorite hobby. I really spend my life focused on the business and then taking care of my family. And I try to get exercise and yoga in when I can.
We'll add that part. I don't blame my wife as the cover on the episode. No, just kidding. See how that goes for you. All right. If you could have any person's job in the world for 1 week, whose job and why?
I don't know if you've heard of like RPA, robotics process automation, and people that look workflow automation within a company. I've been very interested in that. So I don't have the skill set to do it, but like I would love to be shadow or be the lead RPA developer for process improvement and actually had the technical skills to do end-to-end workflow automation. That's just something that I wish I knew how to do. It may be something I go back to school for at a later date.
Cool. That'd be fun. Robotic process automation. I like it. All right. So these are some out there type questions. Decided to have a little bit of fun here. First one, if you had a theme song playing every time you entered a room, what would the song be?
It would be Eminence Front by The Who. So I don't know if you ever heard that one, but it's a very kickback, great song by The Who. It's just got a good vibe. It's got a confident vibe, and it embodies the vibe I try to stay in. So
I might have to fire that one up on the computer and YouTube after we're done here and give it a listen. If I've listened to anything by The Who. All right. If aliens landed tomorrow, what's the first snack you're going to offer them?
well, are they already here? Because aren't they already here? I'm just kidding. The first,
We're not going to
the
go there. Kind of like the bias. We're
all
going to
right,
steer
we
away
won't
from that.
we won't touch that one. I give them my favorite candy. It'd be the giant chewy sweet tarts. I wouldn't give them like cyanide or anything. I'd try to make if they actually landed here, I'd give them my favorite candy because I want to get on their good side.
All righty. Kind of last question before we finish here. If you could offer any last advice to our listeners that would help them future-proof their careers, what do you think they should be doing?
I know we've hit this throughout the thing, but it's continuous networking even when you're not looking. Can you find financial organizations or events where you could, FEI, Financial Executives International, can you put into your part of your life, you should always be part of some kind of local CFO network or controller network where you're just getting to know the other industries or getting engaged. There's one thing that we talk about is there's certain candidates that don't have to apply for jobs. It's kind of like if you think about LeBron James. If LeBron James was going to switch, well, he's getting older now, but if LeBron James was going to switch to another team, he doesn't need to interview. He already knows the whole league. He's got his options. So I think if you're an FP&A or finance manager in a market, that if you're constantly networking, you're going to have your choice of where to go. You're going to be able to tap people once you're available. You're just more in the know, right? And then all of a sudden they'll push you through their HR process, and you can circumvent people like me that do a lot of the arm twisting and getting through HR. So if you can constantly network or try to execute every quarter on some kind of networking event, I think you'll future proof for your career. You'll have stability with your community.
Love it. So network, build those relationships, allow yourself to have those connections. So when you need them.
Call on them.
All right. If someone wants to learn more about you or potentially get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think LinkedIn is great. I check it like a hawk. I'm on it every day. But you can also go to www.frederickfox.com. Take a look at our firm. We've got 50 phenomenal recruiters that have been in the space for a long time. Our team is, I think, excellent. And so you can find us at www.frederickfox.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you message me on LinkedIn, it can even be 11 o'clock at night. I'm likely to respond.
And if not, your AI bot will respond, right?
Right. That's right. Or I'll be in the doghouse with my wife for responding.
That's a good note to end it on before we get ourselves in any more trouble. No, thank you for joining me, Will. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and thanks for sharing some thoughts on the market and just getting hired in FP&A. We have a lot of people always looking for jobs. I get people reaching out to me all the time, so I like to have guests on that can talk from what they're seeing. They're actually in the trenches of hiring every day. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Paul. And if anyone's listening and looking, I'm happy to try to help you.
Thanks for listening to FP&A Tomorrow. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review on your podcast platform of choice. This allows us to continue to bring you great guests from around the globe. As a reminder, you can earn CPE credit by going to earmarkcpe.com, downloading the app, taking a short quiz, and getting your CPE certificate. To earn continuing education credits for the FPAC certification, take the quiz on Earmark and contact me, the show host, for further details.